It's a long, long time ago. I first met Jonas Jamaitis in Paris, late 1937. I had just finished high school and having won a scholarship, arrived in Paris to study at the university. I was 17 years old. I landed in Paris in 37. I was going by myself, but my mother kept running through the station looking for some reliable to help me. And she found Danuta Tarabildiene, who was going to do arts in Paris. So she asked Danuta to look after me. As it turned out later, it was me looking after Danuta more. Seeing that Dana was an artist, we met all the other Lithuanians doing art in Paris. And I became a member of that group, although my course was not in the arts. Other Lithuanian students studying in Paris would meet often and always at the same cafe, Chez Dupont, in the Leiden Quarter. It became so that whenever Lithuanians came from wherever, they would come to that particular cafe and meet any time of the day. And one day a stranger came up and our table just jumped up and went to greet him. It was obvious that they were friends. I was introduced to him and he was Jonas Jamaitis. At the time, he was already an officer and part of the general staff of the Lithuanian army. That's General Jonas Žemaitis. At this day in Lithuania, wherever you go, you find the statues built to him. This is him as I knew him, except that at first I didn't know him in uniform. You wouldn't guess that he was such a deeply attached man to his vocation. He seemed to be versed in everything. He conversed so easily with all the artists. They had a great respect for him. Nearly every weekend he would travel to Paris to find us. Plans would change when he arrived. He was generous to a fault. It became almost a custom that we go somewhere and Žemaitis pays for the lot of us. Most of all, people were drawn to his sincerity, his down-to-earthness, and the attention and consideration he gave to others. We became a little bit closer friends than I think I was with anybody else. And then the time came when, instead of coming to the cafe to meet us, he would take me out by myself. We would go all places that he felt a young person should see. Folies Bergère, Moulin Rouge, those places that it would never have occurred to me or to my other friends to put a foot in. With him I got to know Paris as I would never have done before. In 1938 I already was going out with him more than with anybody else, and towards the end of the year he suggested that we marry. Well, first of all, I was much younger. He was 11 years my senior. Maybe I was too young, too silly, but I did not agree to his proposal. That summer he visited me at my parents' house up in Nemunė. It was a custom to go and watch the sun sink into the sea. One evening we went, there stood a group of young men, and he spoke to them and he introduced me to a man who was my first husband. And then from then on I ignored the poor Žemaitis. As the holidays drew to a close, I returned to France and our path parted. This photograph, he gave it to me and It does have a kind of sentimental inscription in it. It says, "To the beloved, whom I call a Madonna, to a friend of beautiful soul and body, to the girl whom I still believe to be mine." He was still expecting to change my mind, but by then I met my husband, and that was it. You see, all those years have passed. In 1976, when I first could go back again to Lithuania, some of those old friends, especially Dana, contacted me. And so we sat and talked. I stopped and said, "Well, how is Žemaitis? What is he doing?" And the room went absolutely dead quiet. People stopped breathing, it seemed. And then Dana, quite sweetly and innocently, she told me how he united the various partisan groups into the Lithuania underground army. And after long years spent in the snow, he finally was betrayed by somebody, and he was taken to Moscow prison. And he ended by being executed, being shot. The family of his sisters were deported. His old parents had their house burned down, and he must have suffered all that Soviet prisons are famous for. It's so heartbreaking when you know he worked on the constitution for a new freed Lithuania. That's why Jonas Žemaitis still is called the fourth president of Lithuania. To me it was quite hard to imagine him as a general. He never struck you as a very military man. And I thought, why? Why didn't he go back to Paris? There is no reason why he couldn't go, but that's life, I suppose. All things said throughout all my long life, this 1 year with him remains in my memory as the most enlightening and influential period of my youth, of all my friendships, even including the very close ones. I somehow remembered him as somebody who made the biggest influence in my life.